It feels like an eternity since the last time you guys seen me in front of a camera, and it kind of has been. It's been like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks since I've done a video, so seems like it's about that time. Hey folks, welcome back to another video. It's been a little while since you guys have last seen me, but we are here and back at our home casino. It seems like we play at Commerce every video, but look, the game is great, the action is great, and the drive is even better. So sorry about the no upload for a couple weeks. I think I got burnt out from playing so often. And it's funny to say I'm playing 2 times a week and it's just way too often. If you guys didn't notice already, the Close to Broke hoodies are here. They're officially here. Everyone that ordered one should have already got one. There's a couple left. If you guys are interested, make sure to check closetobroke.la.com. If you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe. It costs you guys a grand total of about $0 actually, $0. So it goes a really long way and it helps our channel grow. And obviously we're trying to build a community here. I'm gonna hop into the session. Enough of the talking. I thank you guys for coming by and supporting me always. And yeah, let's get into some fun. As we finally make our way inside of the Commerce Casino, we quickly realize that there is not any seats available. It is fairly early in the day, but they have quite a few 5-10 games going. But unfortunately, we are set to wait. And about 45 minutes go by until we finally get seated. So this first hand is a little funny actually. I look down at 10-7 suited in middle position, and I actually forget what stake we're playing. Considering that the only time I've ever played a 3,000 max game was for a 1020 that I can recall at the Commerce or some LA-based casino, I assume that was the case here. And I was really confused and I was trying to figure out the opening sizing. And luckily the dealer did notify me that we were playing 510. So I go ahead and decide to open it here to $30 from early position. Middle position player as well as the big blind both make the call. The flop is 10-8-3 with 3 clubs, so it's a monotone board. We do flop top pair, but it's a very wet board texture. There's definitely a couple ways to go on this board texture. Considering it's so wet, I think everything is up for grabs. So we can either go 30% on this board texture, 70% on this board texture, or checking, depending on if we want a pot control. And in this case, I think I'm gonna go ahead and bet $45 is what I actually do when it checks over to me. And the reason being is I'd definitely be doing this with really strong hands as well as my bluffs. So if I have ace X of clubs, I'd probably be doing the same thing. So I go ahead and decide to bet $45. And luckily, both players fold. So just wanted to add this in the vlog because I thought it was just pretty hysterical that for how long I've been playing poker and just how lost I am right now. And I haven't played poker in what feels like a month or something. So a little loopy for sure, but we're going to get our bearings here as the session comes along. Quickly moving along to the second hand. Under the gun opens to $30. Small blind looks down at his hand and thinks it's good enough for the $30. The action gets over to me as I am next to act. And we look down at not one, but 2 aces, pocket rockets, American Airlines, something else that starts with 2 A's. This is a great spot, obviously. We look down at pocket aces in the big blind in a beautiful squeeze play where we're going to have a ton of great squeeze spots. I'm going to go ahead and crank up the pressure here. I decided to 3-bet to $150. Looking back, I'm not too satisfied with my sizing, unfortunately. I still think that it is a little bit too small. I think $175 would be the perfect amount, but nonetheless, that is what we decide to do. And luckily for us, the under the gun player decides to make the call and the small blind player gets out of the way quickly. The flop comes 10-9-4 rainbow. This is definitely an interesting flop. The issue is there's no paint on the board, so it doesn't really correlate very well with what I believe the under the gun will be raising and calling a 3-bet with. The one thing I will mention is that the under the gun player did take quite a bit of time before deciding to call here pre-flop. I have a pretty decent timing tell on him at this point of the session, so I do not think he has a hand like 10s or 9s here. I think that we are hoping he has a drawing hand in some fashion like Queen Jack. Although I think it is fine to bet here, I do like mixing in some checks at times, and that's what I decide to do here. Hopefully I can let him tie himself on a rope and just hang himself. Theoretically, of course. Never want that to happen in real life. After a little bit of thinking, he decides to check it back. The turn comes a pretty interesting card. It's the 9 of spades, so it does pair the second card, and it also does bring in that backdoor flush draw. There's now a ton of hands we can be getting value from, of course. Flush draws being a prime amount of that, as well as some gut shots. So I decided to bet $75, keeping it fairly fair for him to call. And I'd again be doing this with a ton of my hands for bluffs, and that'd be hands like king high, queen highs, and ace highs, as well as some ace x of spades that decide to turn some equity and bet small on the turn and probably bomb every river. After a little bit of thinking, he decides to make the call. We are off to the river. We are hoping for a clean one, and it does come a fairly clean river. The 7 of diamonds peels off, so unless we think he has exactly 8-6, there's not a ton of hands for value that are going to be in his range. So after quite a bit of time, I decide to bet $500, a fairly large bet sizing here. And the reason I'm going for the specific sizing is I'm definitely going to be bluffing here for the same sizing with a hand like ace x of spades. And I think it's really important to be considering always be understanding of your range when you get to river spots and have to make big bets. It's really important, and it drastically will improve you as a poker player. So after a little bit of thinking, like I said, I make that huge bet, and he goes into the tank for what seems like an eternity. After quite a bit of thinking, our opponent decides on a fold. Even after pulling the chips out and playing with him, he did not decide to make the call. So unfortunate situation there, but definitely a lot to dissect in a very simple hand. Another fairly simple hand to go over, but I think one that I want to go over nonetheless. Middle position action player decides to open to $40 here. I look down at ace deuce of diamonds here on the button. I definitely prefer to play this as a 3-bet most of the time, but for this instance, I decided to just make the call, considering I feel like there's a pretty weak player in the big blind, and I don't mind playing 3 ways in this instance against 2 players. I think I have a fairly decent edge on post-flop, and luckily the big blind does decide to make the call, so we are off to a flop. The flop comes ace king 10 with 2 hearts and 1 diamond, so we flop top pair as well as a backdoor diamond draw. The action checks over to the middle position player, who decides to bet at $120, a huge sizing here on the board texture. After a little bit of thinking and considering how bad my kicker is, although I do have a great backdoor nut draw, it is only a backdoor draw. So I make a pretty disciplined laydown, I think, in my opinion, by folding the ace there. And luckily for us, the big blind actually raises to $500. Middle position player thinks about it for a second and decides to make the fold. So now I'm really happy about my fold. Obviously, maybe it's results oriented, but I think that was definitely the right play. Pre-flop, much prefer 3-bet if I'm going to play the hand. So happy we minimized the losses nonetheless. Here's a quick, it's a small hand, but I do want to mention it for a couple of reasons. And as you guys can see, a great deal of this vlog is more going into technical stuff. If I'm being frank, we only played like 2 100+ big blind pots in this session. And I think even in these small pots and these really small spots, it's super important to practice strong and good poker. And I'm really proud of myself for really holding it down and kind of being aware of the situation and the environment, especially the table dynamics around me. Here's a prime instance where that comes into play. That action player that's been playing all night has been raising to $40, and for some reason in middle position he decides to open his raise sizing to $45. And although $5 seems like pretty inconsequential, that you still have to realize that there is a difference in the opening size, whether that's showing that he has a stronger hand or a weaker hand, we don't know, but you have to be conscious of these things, especially when you're playing against players that you're probably going to be playing more frequently. This is somebody that I do see that's an action player that comes here pretty often to the games that I play. So with all that being considered, I definitely want to attack this, and at the very least, understand, hopefully I can get the showdown in some aspect. Obviously winning the hand is the most important thing, but I want to see what's up with this weird, why are you changing your bet sizing kind of situation. So when it folds over to me, I look down at Jack 8 of hearts. I want to go ahead and isolate him. I go ahead and re-raise him to $160. It gets over to the OMC button player, who decides to rip in his stack for $600. So everything I just said pretty much goes out of the window in this specific situation, but the middle position player almost instantly folds, and when it gets over to me, I don't have much of an option. I'm going to go ahead and fold my hand here in the cutoff. Like I said, I only bring up this hand because I think it's super important to be conscious, be aware of these things going on around you, because it's really easy for us to sit down and just go through the monotony of poker. You raise, I call, you raise, I 3-bet, yada yada yada. These are the ranges, but These little things are what really can make you a profitable player. Not saying that I'm over here winning 15, 20 big blinds an hour. I just think that the difference between you being a killer in your game and you being a fish is, can be things like this, and they add up. So I don't mind my play, at all. Like I said, for all I know, he could snap call the $600 raise, and the $45, changing his bet sizing means he has strength. But in this specific situation, I just had to bring it up. I thought it was really important and something that I wanted to harp on. It's a quick session mid-session update here. Playing right now, and it's not going very well. Not that it's going bad or anything. Like, just it's an awful table, so don't know how much longer I'm going to be playing for. But the good news is you guys will, probably know in a little bit. So, I'll let you guys know how it goes. Not great, as you guys can see in a couple of hands. Just missing on some value. Maybe I went too large, but I think we're playing pretty well for honestly what's going on. So let's hop back in there and see if we can find any luck.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Well, you know what they say, if you don't succeed, try and try again. And in this next hand, that is exactly what happens. All I can remember is that a lot of people limp, and I look down at Jack 8 of hearts once again here in the cutoff. Same position, same hand, same suit. Is this fate? Only God knows. Although I do like to isolate here, considering there's like 3 or 4 limps ahead of me, I honestly don't mind playing multi-way. There is a way to make the nuts with this hand, which is kind of nice. So I don't mind playing this hand multi-way like I mentioned. So I go ahead and limp behind, and luckily only the big blind makes a limp as well. The flop comes Queen 9-3 Rainbow. There is 1 heart out there luckily, as well as a gut shot for our hand to get improved to the second nut straight. Luckily for us, the action actually checks through here on this flop. Outstanding. Let's see if we can bink a turn, and like Brad Owen would say, let's see if we can channel the energy right here, folks. If you guys can give us a like. If I can't hit a miracle 10 somehow, maybe somehow, I can at least find a way to bluff my way out of this hand. Like on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Bingo, bango, bongo. You wouldn't believe it. The turn comes a beautiful offsuit 10, putting out the complete rainbow out there. And even more music to my ears, the big blind OMC decides to lead out for $15 for whatever reason. The middle position action player, again, another perfect player to be in the hand, decides to make the call. When it gets back over to me, I now have a decision to make. Do I want to raise? Do I want to just call? I think it's pretty obvious we have to raise the pot here. We got to get a little more money in this pot. This was a limp pot like 5 or 6 ways, so we want to start building up the pot and start narrowing ranges here so we can go for some really polarized bet sizing here on the river. After a little bit of thinking, I decide $65 is the right amount to raise it to, so I go ahead and do just that. The big blind OMC decides to make the call, and we are off to a river, hoping for an absolute brick of a river. And the river comes just that. It is a 5 of hearts. When he checks it over to me, I now have a little bit of a decision to make. What do we think he had? And where is his range at? I think that most of his range that is going to be of value consists of 2 pair plus. The good thing though is that because I'm holding a jack, it's less likely that he has a draw and more likely that he has some sort of a made hand. And like I said, I'm putting him, especially because he's an OMC, on a minimum of 2 pair. So after a bit of thinking and deliberating, I decide to bomb it here. Bombs away. After he checks to me, I bet $300, a huge over bet, I believe. And I think this is the right thing. I'm targeting hands like 2 pair. I'm a young player to him, so I hope that he thinks I'm just blasting off here. But unfortunately, none of that is to be. He pretty quickly decides to make the fold, but I'm pretty happy all in all how we played the hand there. As we come down to the last hand of the session, early position action player that we've been talking about quite a bit decides to limp here. It gets over to me in late position, and I look down at King 9 of spades. I go ahead and isolate for $55. The big blind and the limper make the call. I've been playing hands with the same 2 people the whole night for whatever reason, but that is okay. And if it wasn't good enough already that these guys are in the hand, the deck is still smashing me in the face. The flop comes ace, king, king, rainbow. Yes, rainbow. When the action checks over to me, because I've destroyed this flop pretty much, and I don't think there's a ton of really big hands in the range here. There is a couple of top pairs, obviously. I do want to bet a catch-all sizing here. I'm going to definitely have hands like Queen Jack, Queen 10, Jack 10, and Jack 9 in my range as bluffs. And obviously, we're going to have some big hands like aces, kings, ace, king, King 9 obviously is in my range, so King 10 will be as well. King Jack, king, queen. There's a ton of value and a pretty decent amount of bluffs in my range here. So I'm going to go ahead and bet $20. It folds over to the middle position player who decides to make the call. The turn is a pretty disgusting card, to be fair. It comes another ace, so now the board is double paired, but it does bring a backdoor flush draw. After a little bit of thinking, our opponent grabs some chips, $150 worth of chips, and pump fakes. So he puts the chips out in front over the line and hits a check. So I'm not sure what to make of it, but I remember at the time specifically, and I even wrote down in my notes that if he bet, I was going to snap fold. I just felt like this was him trying to fake some kind of weakness and then be like, la-di-da, here's a bet. But luckily, when he checks to me, obviously there's not much to do here. So I go ahead and decide to check it back to play pot control. The river comes, an interesting card. It does bring that backdoor flush draw. And after a little bit of thinking, he decides to bet $150. Look, I mean it when I say it, so I want you guys to trust me. But if he bet the turn, I was going to instantly fold and just be like, hoorah, we made some sick folds today. I'm proud of myself. But when we get to the river and the flush does get there, I think that there is going to be some times where he's going to show up on this river with some flushes. But that's pretty much it. He's pretty much representing an ace, so top boat or kind of a really good flush. And with that being considered and considering his sizing, I don't think I can just make the fold considering we are getting a pretty decent price. So I decide to make the station call. And of course for us, he shows ace-5. Pretty overkill here on the river. 5 did come and it did bring the flush draw, but he already had a boat on the turn anyway. So unfortunate for us, obviously, in hindsight, not a ton of bluffs he's going to have on that river. And again, we're not beating much value unless he's getting really thin and deciding to bet the nut flush or the second nut flush here on the river. Then obviously that'd be great because we can beat that value. But besides that, we're not beating really anything at all. So definitely unfortunate in some cases. And the worst part is there's going to be some chops in that range. So it makes this call even more not optimal, but you live and you learn. I don't really hate myself for anything in the hand. I think I played it fairly well for what was a horrific table, as you guys saw me talk about in the mid-session update. But it is what it is. You can only do so much with what you're given. And like I said, I think that for the circumstances, for how bad the table was and not being able to game select as much as I would like to, I'm pretty satisfied with the outcome.
Hey folks, this brings us back to where it all started. I appreciate you guys coming through and hanging out with us today. To be honest, kind of a boring ass session. There was like 2 or 3 pots that even eclipsed 100 big blinds, and yeah, kind of boring. The table was pretty nitty, which is never any fun. And yeah, not a bunch of action to be fair. I think I played fairly well though for the for the situation, so I can't complain too much. If you guys haven't already, make sure to cop the new Close to Broke stuff. If you don't like the pink hat, the pink cards, what I do, we have a bunch of regular colors as well as a hoodie, which is outstanding, a nice lightweight hoodie. But beyond that, the next episode you guys will see will be probably me playing at the Hustler Casino at the Wolfgang and next gen poker meetup game. Should be a great time. But beyond that, I'll see you guys soon. Stay happy, stay healthy, and yeah, run good. Thank you guys for stopping by. Deuces.